Hey guys.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey, doctor.
Tzadik, hey, 95. Rav Yehuda, we're about 5 lines from the top. We're dealing with the case, if you remember, whether if a husband sleeps with his wife's sister, whether his wife becomes usher to him. We've been saying now that she does not become usher to him. It's not like when a husband's wife is mezaneh and it's usher labal or laboya. We said with a husband's wife, it's if he sleeps with the wife's sister because he thought that the wife was dead and then she comes back, she's still allowed to live. He's still allowed to live with his wife.
Are you on 92 or 93?
95.
Oh, 95. Okay, good. Okay.
Tzadik hey.
Yeah, okay. I got, yeah.
Rav Yehuda lo nechleku beishav beiselo v'bal chamoisoi shepoisel ishto. That both Beishav and Beisilo hold that if a man lives with his mother-in-law, he cannot live with his wife anymore. Alma nechleku b'bal ishto. If he mistakenly lives with his wife's sister, shebaishamai oimrim poisel, that act prevents him from in the future living with his wife. Ubeisel oimrim loy poisel. On Rabbi Yossi, the opposite. Loy nechleku beishav beisel v'bal achois ishtoi, shaloi poisel es ishto. According to Rabbi Yossi, and that's how we paskin, Beishav and Beisel do not argue that if Adim came and said that his wife had died, and then he lived with his wife's sister, and then his wife showed up, he can go back and live with his wife. Alma nechleku b'bal chamoisoi. The machlokes is his mother-in-law. Shebeishamai oimrim poisel. That if the man lives with his mother-in-law, he cannot go back to live with his wife. Ubeisel oimrim loy poisel. Lefi shebetchilahu muter b'chol hanashim sheba'olam. Before he got married, he can live with all women. V'hi muteres b'chol hanashim sheba'olam. And before she was married, she was also permitted to live with any man. Kidsha, once a man gives a woman kiddushin, hu asra, v'hi asraso. He asers her on certain men, and she asers him on certain women. Meruba isr sha'asra mi isr sha'asartuhu. Hello. It is Stevie. No, I'm teaching Daf Yomi right now. Should I call you back? I'll be there in about a half hour. I'll call you back. Shehu asr b'chol hanashim shebe'olam. When he gives a woman kiddushin, she now becomes prohibited to all men in the world. V'hi lo asar tehu el b'krov v'seha. He may no longer live with her relatives, but he can live with other women. So he assered her more than she assered him. And that creates a kal v'chomer. And therefore, v'haloi dinhu. Umahu sha'asr b'chol hanashim shebe'olam. He, by his act of kiddushin, assers her on the whole world. Shagaga ba'asr la. If she is a shoygeg, let's say, in another man that she's prohibited to live, she can still go back and live with her husband. For example, except if it's a kohen, if it's a regular Yisrael, if she gets raped, she's mezanas neshas ish, but as a shoygeg. Or if Adim come to tell her that her husband is dead, she can go back to her original husband, except Eid Echad. If it's two Adim, then it's like a shogeg. So Eino Neseres b'mutter law. She, by accepting kiddushin from this man, only prohibited him from living with her relatives. If he is shogeg ba'asr, if he made a shogeg mistake and lived with his wife's sister, Eino din shelo neslo b'mutter law, he should be able to go back to live with his wife. So that's the kal v'chomer. V'zeh din l'shogeg. So al shoygeg, we learn it from a kal v'chomer misvara. Lemezid, if, for example, he lived with his wife's sister b'mezid minayin tamad lomer oisa, it's a pasuk osa shchivasa osarta, where it's by if a woman is mezana as a neshas ish b'mezid, it's osar labalu laboya, but ein shchivas achoisa osarta. But living with a wife's sister does not prohibit him from going back to live with his wife. And that's the halacha. The Rambam says, like ima, bita, bas bita, achoisa, bein shu adavar b'shoigeg or b'zodna afilu b'oifen shechav l'misas bezdin, ein ishto neseres alav machmas kein k'Rav Yosi. We pasuk like Rav Yosi that he can live with his wife. It's not osur l'bal, osur l'boyel, like in the case when a woman is mezaneh as an neshas ish. And we learned this yesterday as well. Rav Avi Shlokish Maitam and Rav Yehuda. Dichsiv ba'esh yisrafu os'o ve'eshen. We don't burn the mother-in-law and the daughter. So imenu in l'sreifa tnein l'isura. Rabbi Yehuda says that we learn it as an isra that according to Rabbi Yehuda, if he lives with the mother-in-law, he cannot live with the daughter either. However, on Ravina Amar Shmuel ein halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is not like that. And even if he lives with chamoisai, he can live with his wife. There was a man who committed an avera with his mother-in-law. Also, Rav Yehuda Nagde, Rav Yehuda Lishitoso gave him malchus. And if it wasn't for Shmuel that said that halacha is not like me, I would have asked you to go back to live with your wife forever. Okay. Then in the Baraisa that we learned said Ma b'makam shabal isur kal nesara oiser. They created a kal v'chomer between an isur kal, like a light prohibition, which then would learn a kal v'chomer to a more chumra prohibition. And the Gemara is going to attempt to discover what do we mean by isur kal. My isur kal. The isur kal that we're talking about is someone got married and divorced his wife, and then she married somebody else. Based on that, you're not allowed to go and live with her again. If he does, he's called a Masr Grushoso. And bo aleha, if he does, if the second husband had lived with her, so asra aleha dahai, so it asers the first husband from ever marrying her again. Bo aleha idach, but let's say the first husband lives with her, asra aleha dahai. So if the second husband had divorced her and now she went back to her first husband, it asers the second husband. So mala machzak rushaso mishenisis. Now, why is it considered kal? Shekain nitma haguf. I mean, why would we consider this kal? The Torah says, achrei asher hu tama, by machzak rushaso. So there's a tuma involved. Number two, v'isur barov. This isur exists by most Bnei Yisrael equally. And isur oilam. It's not an isur that goes away. A machzak rushaso can never live, Mishenisis can never live with her. So why do you call that, says the Gemara, isur kal? Ela amr reish lakish yevama. We're talking about a case of yevama. Now, Yevama Laman. Now, who we talk about that she's a Yevama? Ilema La'acher. That means she was Reuven and Shimon were brothers. Reuven was married, and then Reuven died. And the woman falls to Shimon. But before Shimon could do Chlitzer Yibum, she lived with an Acher, an Ish Zar Lachutz, who's not her Yavin. That means the Shimon can never do Yibum to her. So are we going to call that an Isser Kal? Mali Yavama Shekenit Maguf. Number one, a Shomeres Yavim that is Zinsa, there's also the Torah speaks of her as being metame her body. And the Isra Barov. It's an Isra that exists by all women. Eli Yavama La'achim. It's some type of Isra, that's the Isra Kal, where among the, let's say there were 5 brothers. For example, Ovid Bo Maimer Hai. One brother does Maimer to the woman. Asra Alei Dahai. The act of Maimer now prohibits the other brothers from marrying her. Bo Aleha Idich, if one of the other brothers lived with her after Maimer was done, Asra Alei Dahai. That act asers the person who did Maimer to live with her. So, my ir Yeshabah Aleh Sheni, you don't have to come onto a case of Bia with another brother. I feel of a Banami Maimer, even another brother who did Maimer would aser on the original brother who said Mahaloi Kasher, that's correct. But Liel, Domer Ein Maimer Achar Maimer. When Liel holds you, the second Maimer doesn't have any force, so it would have to be Bia to ruin it. But, says the Gemara, Filu Nosan Laget. But let's say one brother gave Maimer, and another brother stood up and gave her a get, or Vafilu Cholatzla. So that would also prevent another brother from living with her. So that can't be Isser Kal either. Elo Omer Rav Yochanan Soita. We're talking about a woman that was warned by her husband not to sequester herself with such and such man. So the Gemara says Sota Laman. Ilema Labal. And there is a din that once the husband warns her, he's not allowed to live with her. So, bol aleh bal asra aleh de boyel. Now, if the husband lives with her after he warned her, she's usher to ever go back and live with the boyel even after a get. So, my irya bo aleha. You don't need be there either. Afilu nosan laget. If the first husband gave her a get, it would aser on the boil. Vafilo Amar Aniyin Mashke, where it says, I'm not going to take her up to the base of Mikdash. Elasot la boil. She mamish had bia with the man that she was warned about. And now she can never go back to her husband forever. She was an Eishes Ish at that time. So the Gemara says, how can you call that Hai Isser Kalu, Isser Chomer? I know Eishes Ish. That's the most Chomer Dik Isser. It's an Eishes Ish. Elo Amarova Eishes Ish. And a Chanami. The Isser Kal that we're talking about is an Eishes Ish. Why? Umay Korila Isser Kal. Why is the Isser of Eishes Ish considered an Isser Kal? Sheina Oisra Oisra Kol Yomov. When you marry a woman, it's not that you don't prohibit her forever. You can give her a divorce, and then she's free to marry somebody else. It's not like a family relationship that remains forever. So in that respect, it's considered an Isser Kal. What's the Isser Kal? Eishes Ish. And now comes the Kal V'chomer. Uma b'makam habal Isser Kal. Sheheina Oisra Kol Yomov. There, when a man is Makadesh a woman, the prohibition on that woman is not forever. He can give her a get. Nasar ha'oiser. There, if an Eishes Ish is mezana, she may never go back to live with her husband. Habo alisar chamor. If you live with it, for example, achos ishto. And why is that more chamer? Sha'oiser oiser kol yomav. As long as his wife is alive, there's an isser to live with her sister. It's a more chamer deke isser than Eishes Ish because it's more permanent. So einodin shenesra oisra. So it should prohibit him to live with his wife if he's mezana with the isha. Talmud Loimer, we learn it from a pasuk. Osa shchivasa osarta. Only by an Eishes Ish who's mezana does the shchiva aser her forever on her husband. But the ein shchivas achoisa osarta. But if her husband lives with his sister, it doesn't prevent the husband from going back to live with his wife. Period. Then, in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi Oimer, Kol shepoisel al yedei acherim, poisel al yedei atzmo. She'ein poisel al yedei acherim, eino poisel al yedei atzmo. It was a strange statement that we didn't understand then, and Rashi there said, "Oh, the Gemara will explain." So here it is. My comment, Rabbi Yossi. What does Rabbi Yossi mean? The Tanakama's case, the Ozil Ishto the Gisul Dinasayam. His wife and his wife's sister husband traveled to China. And then Adim came to say that they were dead. And he married his wife's sister. So Eishes Giso Asira. So his wife's sister can't go back to her husband. She was an Eishes Ish, she was Mizaneh. But the Ishto Sharya, but the man who lived with the sister can go back to his wife. The Ka'amale Rabbi Yossi, Ki Heiche the Ishto Sharya Eishes Gisho Nami Sharya. You can't have it both ways. If the Boyel, the one who lived with the sister, can go back to his wife, so the sister-in-law, the wife's sister, can go back to her husband. But ihachi, this wording kol she'ein poisel de'acherim ein poisel de'atzmo is not correct. Kol she'ein poisel de'atzmo ein poisel de'acherim aboile. Ella must be a case ki hechi de'eshes giso asira eshes nami ishto nami asira. So in a case where a person's wife and the brother-in-law, his wife's sister, went to China. Adim came and said they were dead. the husband lived with the wife's sister, and then they come back. So just like the wife's sister who's mezaneh, as Nesha Sish, cannot go back to live with her husband, Ishto Nami Asira. Well, the husband who slept with the sister can also not go back to his wife. So then Hatinich Kol Shepoisel. Kol She'ena Posel Ma'avidite. So again, the statement of Rav Yossi doesn't make sense. Ravami, Aresha, we're going on the Resha. Where? Nisas al Pi Bezdin, which was Eid Echad came and said a person's husband was dead, and she married based on that. We said if the husband comes back, Tate say, Uftura Mina Korban. And she doesn't bring a korban. It's not considered a real shogeg. But al pi edim, if two edim came and she heard testimony from edim and she didn't go to Bezdin, she got married based on the testimony of edim, Tate say, she still has to get divorced. V'chayeves bekorban, she has to bring a korban. Yafa koach shel Bezdin, shepotra mina korban. Bezdin was stronger because at least it pottered her from korban. V'ka'omer Tanakama, and the Tanakama responds and says, Loishna al pi edim deishes gisur sharya. If the case was edim, the wife's sister can go back to her husband. V'loishna al pi bezdin deishes gisur asira. And it doesn't make a difference in that case. The wife's sister will not be able to go back to her husband. V'ka'omer Rabbi Yossi, al pi bezdin, the poisel yedei acherim, poisel yedei atzmo. Al pi edim, the ena poisel yedei acherim, ena poisel yedei atzmo. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins, according to Rav Yossi, halcha ishto ubal achos ishto, a person's wife and his wife's sister's husband went to China. Edim came and said that they both died. And the man married v'nosas achos ishto. The man married his wife's sister. V'achakach bau ishto v'girus. And then they both show up. Achos ishto tzricha mimenu get. So the guy who lived with the sister has to give her a get. Whether it was Eid Echad, whether it was Shnei Edim. And that woman cannot go back and live with her husband. V'ishto asura alav bein shais nesua arusa. Me'achar she'esavik b'psak halacha shel Shmuel and posek Rav Yossi lefi ezber Rav Yitzchak Nafcha. Ok ezber Rav Ami holchim l'chumra k'devri shneim. She'poskim Rav Yossi l'das Rav Yitzchak Nafcha she'choshen l'tnai. L'chei nesa barusos b'chon mikra. It's always osir if there was kiddushin. And even if the wife got married al pi eid echad, we're machmer as well. Now, Rav Yitzchak Nafcha Omar, Lo'olam HaSeifa, it's not on the Reish, it's on the Seifa. Hadanasiv Eishes Giso, Vadanasiv Arusas Giso. One case is that the sister-in-law had been married with Nesuin, and the other case is that there was only Kiddushin with the brother-in-law. Hada Azli Arusas Giso. If there was only Kiddushin and they went to China, if the woman he gave Kiddushin to and his brother-in-law went to China, or if there was full Nesuin and his wife who was fully married to her and the brother-in-law went to China. The Ka'amar Tanakama Loishna Ishta V'Giso V'Loshna Rusasosa V'Giso makes no difference. Eisha's Giso Asira, when they come back, the sister will not be able to go back to her husband, but he can go back to his wife, Ishto Sharya. The Carmelite Rabbi Yossi say, Ishto V'Giso, it's a full wife. The Lekala Memer Tnav Leben Nesuin. There are no Tnoim by Nesuin. You can make Tnoim in Kiddushin, but not if you live with her. The Eino Posal Yedei Acher, Eino Posal Yedei Atzmo. So he can't puzzle either of them. But arusasa v'giso, if you'd only given kiddushin, and then his brother-in-law, the ikla meimer tnavle b'kiddushin, u'poisel yedechem av poisel yedei atzmo, then he can puzzle with his act. Amar v'damar Shmuel ach Rabbi Yosef, maskil Rabbi Yosef, u'miyamar Shmuel achi, v'ha'itma yevama Rava maharehi ke'eshes ish, u'Shmuel amar eina ke'eshes ish. Now, what does this case talk about? Amar Ravuna, kigon shekidish achi v'sa'isha. Reuven gave kiddushin to a woman. And then Reuven goes to China. V'shama shemes achiv. And Shimon, he hears that his wife, that the brother died. And the woman that the Reuven had given kiddushin to, Shimon stood up, v'nosa sisha, married her through Yibum. And then the guy comes back from China. The Rava Maharei Ke'eshes Ish, Vasur Liyavim. It's Asur L'Baal L'Boyel, that the Yavim cannot stay married to her. Ushmul Amar Ena Ke'eshes Ish, V'shayele, and he can stay married to her. When Shmuel said, the halachas of Rabbi Yossi, who said that it was according to the sheet of Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha? Dilma ad Rabami Ka'amar. That's number one. V'inami, even if you're going to say Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, mimai da poisel, but Dilma ain't a poisel. Maybe it's not the case of poisel, it's the case of ain't a poisel, of the Eishes Giso, and that the Giso can go back and live with his wife. Okay.
I can ask you, Ernie, if a man makes mimer to the Yavama, and then she goes out and marries a stranger, they have a child. Is that a mamzer? We say that mimer.
No,
is
they're
just
not. No.
It's not.
The mimer is only Rabban. Maybe Suffolk. All of that, it was not mamzer deraisa because mimer is only a rabbinic structure.
So is a mamzer d'Rabbanan then? Is it, or not at all?
Well, let's talk first about a woman who goes out to marry a stranger without yibum or chlitza.
Right.
So there we learn that it's not mamzer. It's a lav.
Yeah, but he
Or
doesn't.
mamzer.
There, nobody makes a mimer yet. That just goes automatically.
But the zika is a problem. It's a
The
lav.
zika, yeah.
The mimer strengthens it, but it doesn't. It's not as wide yet. Mimer is like at most it's kiddushin d'Rabbanan. So at most it's going to be Suffolk mimes or mamzer d'Rabbanan at most.
So the case before we learned ein mimer acha mimer, the second one.
The second mimer doesn't do anything.
Nothing. So is the first one still in effect then? The first mimer is still in effect. Yeah. So the second brother doesn't hurt at all. If one brother makes a mimer and the others
according to we hold yeshmach mimer achar mimer. So if the second brother made mimer as well, now nobody can marry her.
All right.
None of the brothers.
So we do. But I thought so mimer you say is Rabbanan. So why do they say yesh mimer acha mimer? If it's just Rabbanan, then why should the second mimer be anything then? Why should it disrupt?
Why not? Because the machloikes whether yesh mimer achar mimer or ein mimer achar mimer. We hold yesh mimer achar mimer, that the second mimer has halachic significance, and it ruins. Reuven gave mimer, and now Shimon does mimer. So now none of them can. And let's say there's Levi and Yehuda, none of them can be miyabim her anymore.
Okay.
If you hold ein mimer achar mimer,
then there's nothing.
Then Reuven can do the yibum.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, 8:00.
Sure.
That's good.